John Harlan was not your average man. He wasn't famous, he didn't own a big company, and he never showed off. But what he did have was something very rare, a massive piece of land that most people could only dream about owning. It all started with a quiet man named John who lived a simple life. He had inherited over 1,500 acres of untouched land from his grandfather, deep in the countryside of the American Midwest. That's more than 2 square miles of open space, trees, hills, rivers, and wild animals. It was beautiful, peaceful, and completely away from the noise of cities and traffic. John didn't live on the land himself. He had a small house in another town where he lived alone. He liked peace and quiet, and he preferred to stay out of the spotlight. But even though he wasn't farming or building anything on the land, it still meant a lot to him. It was a family treasure passed down for generations. He hired a lawyer to manage things like property taxes and legal papers. Every year he paid the taxes on time without ever visiting the land. His plan was simple: keep the land safe until the right time came to sell it for a good price. Now, next to John's huge plot of land, there was a small neighborhood called Pine Hollow Estates. It was a modest community of about 78 homes built close together, surrounded by nature. These houses were nice, but nothing fancy. Most of the people living there were families, retirees, or young couples just starting out. The neighborhood was run by something called an HOA, Homeowners Association. An HOA is like a mini-government for neighborhoods. They make rules about how you can paint your house, when you can water your lawn, and sometimes even what kind of car you can park in your driveway. If you don't follow their rules, they can fine you or even take you to court. The HOA at Pine Hollow Estates was especially strict. They had a powerful board of members who thought they ran everything in the area. They wanted to grow the neighborhood, build new roads, maybe even add a clubhouse or a pool. But there was a problem. They didn't have enough space. The land they needed was right next to John Harlan's 1,500-acre property. Over the years, the HOA had tried many times to talk to John. They sent letters, emails, even called his lawyer. They offered to buy parts of his land, promising fair prices and development deals. But John always said no. He wasn't interested in selling yet. He believed the land would be worth much more in the future. At first, the HOA members respected his decision, but as time went on, they became frustrated. They saw John as someone who was holding back progress. To them, he was just some rich guy who owned land he wasn't using. They thought he should share it with the community. One day, during a meeting behind closed doors, the HOA board came up with a dangerous idea. What if they could claim John's land was abandoned? What if they could say he hadn't used it in years and didn't care about it anymore? They started looking into something called adverse possession. That's a tricky legal term that means if someone uses another person's land openly and without permission for a long time, they might actually be able to claim ownership of it under certain conditions. So the HOA began doing strange things. They started cutting trees on John's side of the fence. They told contractors that the land was now part of the neighborhood. They even put up signs saying Pine Hollow Community Park near the edge of John's property. But John didn't know any of this. He was far away, living his quiet life. He trusted his lawyer and assumed everything was under control. Then one day, everything changed. John got a letter from a real estate agent. At first, he thought it was junk mail. But when he opened it, his blood ran cold. The letter said, "Dear property owner, we are pleased to inform you that your 1,500-acre parcel has been listed for sale. A developer has already shown interest. Please contact us within 10 days to confirm ownership." John stared at the paper. He read it again and again. How could this be happening? He had never sold the land. He hadn't signed anything. He hadn't even been contacted. His hands shook as he called his lawyer. Within hours, the truth started coming out. Somehow the HOA had managed to forge documents, bribe a county clerk, and file false paperwork claiming that John had abandoned the land. They had created fake records showing that the HOA had been using the land for years. Then, they transferred ownership to themselves and sold it to a developer for $4.2 million. John couldn't believe it. These people, neighbors he'd never even met, had stolen his entire inheritance. They had taken advantage of a system that was supposed to protect everyone and turned it against him. But John wasn't the kind of man to panic or cry over lost money. He was calm, smart, and patient. He knew the law, and he knew that while they may have gotten away with the crime, they wouldn't get away with the punishment. Instead of calling the police or screaming for justice, he did something unexpected. He smiled, and then he started making a plan. Because if they thought they could steal from him and get away with it, they were about to learn a hard lesson. John Harlan was not a man who got angry easily. He didn't yell or scream. But when he realized what had happened, that his 1/500 acres had been stolen by a group of neighbors he barely even knew, something deep inside him changed. He sat in silence for a long time after reading the letter from the real estate agent. His coffee went cold on the table. The clock ticked. Outside, birds chirped like nothing had happened. But inside John's mind, everything had just changed. He picked up his phone and called his lawyer, Mr. Thomas Reed, a calm and sharp man with over 30 years of experience handling property cases. "Thomas," John said slowly, "someone has stolen my land." There was a pause on the other end. "What are you talking about?" asked Mr. Reed. "They forged documents, bribed someone at the county office, and now they're selling it as if it's theirs," John replied. "I just got a letter saying my land is being listed for sale." Mr. Reed sighed. He wasn't surprised. He had seen this kind of thing before. Not exactly like this, but similar. People using the law like a weapon instead of a shield. Using paperwork and signatures to steal things without ever lifting a finger. "I'll look into it," he said. "But I need more than just your word. Let me check the records." Within 48 hours, Mr. Reed confirmed the worst. The HOA board had pulled off an elaborate scheme. They had created fake documents showing that John had abandoned the land. They claimed they had used it for years, built trails, planted trees, held small community events. None of it was true, but they had found people willing to lie under oath. They had even paid off a low-level county clerk to file the false ownership transfer. That clerk had signed the papers quietly without raising any alarms. Now, legally, the land belonged to the HOA, and worse yet, they had already sold it to a developer for $4.2 million. John listened carefully as Mr. Reed explained everything. There were no raised voices, no drama, just facts. Cold, hard facts. "So what can we do?" John asked. "We can fight it," said Mr. Reed. "But it won't be easy. These people have money now. They'll try to drag this out. They'll hire big lawyers. They'll make it expensive and slow." John nodded. He expected that. "I don't care how long it takes," he said. "I want my land back, and I want them to pay." That night, John didn't sleep much. He sat in his chair, staring out the window at the moon. He thought about his grandfather, who had once taken him camping on that same land. He remembered the stories his dad told about how hard his family had worked to keep the property through wars, droughts, and bad times. Now, some greedy neighbors had tried to erase all of that with a few fake papers and a bribe. No way. The next morning, John did something unexpected. He hired a team, not just lawyers. He hired experts. A private investigator to dig into the HOA members' pasts. A forensic auditor to trace where the money went. A tech guy who could recover deleted emails and hidden files. He also hired a public relations consultant, not to help him win the case, but to prepare for the storm that was coming. Because John knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just going to be a legal battle. It was going to be a war. Over the next few weeks, John's team got to work. The private investigator discovered that two of the HOA board members had criminal records, one for fraud, the other for embezzlement. Neither had disclosed this when they ran for the board. The forensic auditor found that the $4.2 million from the sale had gone into secret bank accounts linked to the HOA board, not the neighborhood itself. That meant the money wasn't being used for roads, parks, or schools. It was being split among a few powerful people. And the tech expert? He recovered deleted emails between the HOA members and the county clerk. In those messages, they openly discussed how to make the land ours and joked about how nobody will notice. When Mr. Reed saw the evidence, even he was shocked. "This is gold," he said. "We can take these people down hard." But John had another idea. Instead of going straight to court, he leaked the emails to a local reporter he trusted. Within days, the story broke. Local HOA accused of stealing land worth millions. Secret emails reveal plot to fraudulently take ownership of private property. The town exploded. Neighbors were furious. Families who lived in Pine Hollow estates felt betrayed. They had no idea their leaders had done something so wrong. Some even started calling for the arrest of the HOA board. The county clerk who helped with the fraud was suspended. An FBI investigation began. The developer backed out of the deal. John watched it all unfold from a distance. He didn't give interviews. He didn't post online. He just waited because he knew the best part was still to come. The HOA, now under pressure, tried to fix their mistake. They offered to return the land and apologize, but John refused. "I'm not here for apologies," he said. "I'm here for justice." Then came the final twist. While digging through old property records, John's team found something strange, a forgotten clause buried in the original HOA charter. It said that if the parent company that created the HOA ever dissolved, which it had, the HOA's authority would expire unless renewed every 20 years. And guess what? They hadn't renewed it, which meant the HOA had been operating illegally for years. And because of that, John had a right to buy the HOA's corporate charter at auction, which was scheduled for the following week. So with a smirk on his face and a checkbook in hand, John showed up at the courthouse. He was the only bidder. For just $2,700. He bought the entire HOA. That meant he now technically owned all 78 homes in the neighborhood. And he was going to use that power in a very special way. Because if they thought stealing his land was smart, they had no idea what was coming next. After John Harlan legally bought the HOA for just $2,700, most people thought he would do one of two things: either leave the neighborhood alone or sell it back right away. But John wasn't like most people. He had a plan. A long, slow, smart plan. And it was time to start putting it into action. The moment he became the legal owner of the HOA, everything changed. The 78 homes in Pine Hollow Estates were now technically his property. Not the residents', his. Of course, that didn't mean he could kick them out overnight. There were still laws to follow, rules about evictions, and contracts with homeowners. But what it did mean was that he controlled the HOA's rules, money, and decisions. And he planned to use every bit of that power. At first, the residents didn't even know what had happened. The HOA board had already been arrested or resigned after the land theft scandal. So when new letters started coming from HOA management, no one thought much of it. But then strange things began happening. First, all the old HOA rules, the ones that said you couldn't park an RV in your driveway or paint your house blue, suddenly disappeared. Overnight, people could do whatever they wanted with their homes. Then the monthly HOA fees stopped. No more payments, no fines, no restrictions. People were confused but happy. "I can finally build that shed I wanted," said one man. "My dog used to get me fined for barking too loud. Now I don't care," laughed another. Nobody knew who was behind these changes. They just enjoyed the freedom. But John wasn't done yet. Behind the scenes, he quietly changed the HOA's bank account information, canceled insurance policies, and froze all official communications. He also hired a new lawyer, not Mr. Reed, but someone younger and more aggressive, to handle the next phase of his plan. Meanwhile, the former HOA members tried to fight back. They met in secret, trying to find a way to regain control. One of them even tried to file a lawsuit, claiming that John had taken over unfairly. But John's team shot that down fast. His lawyers showed the court the original HOA charter, the expired status, and the legal auction where he had bought the HOA. Everything checked out. The judge ruled that John had followed every rule, so the HOA stayed under his control. Now the real challenge began. John knew he couldn't just keep holding on to the HOA forever. That would look suspicious. He needed to make a bold move, something that would teach the neighbors a lesson, but also protect himself legally. So, he made a decision. He was going to sell all 78 homes, not give them back, not rent them out forever. Sell them to anyone, anywhere. And he was going to do it the legal way. He hired a real estate agent, not a local one, but a national firm known for selling large properties quickly. He gave them a simple instruction. List all 78 homes on the market, no HOA fees, no rules, just clear titles. Whoever wants to buy, let them. The agent looked shocked. "Sir, are you sure?" "You'll cause chaos." John smiled. "That's the point." Within a week, the listings went live online. Every home in Pine Hollow Estates was suddenly up for sale at once. The internet exploded. Real estate investors saw the chance to buy entire neighborhoods for cheap. Young couples looking for affordable housing rushed to see if they could get a deal. Some people even came from other states. And the current residents? Panic set in. They had thought they were safe. They had thought the HOA situation was over, but now they realized they might lose their homes. One woman cried as she read the listing for her own house. "This can't be real," she whispered. "I've lived here for 20 years. Another man called his neighbor. "They're selling our houses without asking us?" Exactly. Because legally, John didn't have to ask. As the HOA owner, he had the right to sell the homes. The residents were still technically allowed to live there. They could choose to buy their own homes again, or move out. But either way, they had to face the truth. John wasn't playing games anymore. As the days passed, buyers started showing up. Investors offered cash. Real estate agents walked through homes uninvited. Some residents tried to negotiate with John, offering to buy their homes directly. But John refused to talk. Instead, he released a short statement. "This is justice. What goes around comes around. If my land was stolen, why shouldn't yours be sold too?" It was cold, it was harsh, but it was fair. And slowly the sales began. First, a few homes went to young families who had always dreamed of owning a place in the country. Then, bigger investors bought blocks of homes to turn them into rentals. Within weeks, over half the neighborhood had new owners. Some longtime residents moved out. Others stayed, hoping to save enough money to buy back their homes before they were gone. The town was split. Some people said John was a hero, a man who stood up to corruption and fought back in the only way he could. Others called him cruel, usually a man who had turned innocent people's lives upside down just to get revenge. But John didn't care what they said. He had played by the rules. He had won the game. And now he was sending a message to every HOA in America. Don't mess with private property. Don't try to steal what isn't yours, because if you do, you might just wake up one day and find yourself living in a house that no longer belongs to you. The town was in chaos. In just a few weeks, over half the homes in Pine Hollow Estates had been sold to new owners. Some were families looking for affordable housing, others were real estate investors planning to rent out the properties or flip them for profit. But for the people who had lived there for years, it felt like their lives were falling apart. Some couldn't afford to buy back their own homes. Others didn't want to live in a neighborhood that no longer felt like home. A few tried to fight back, hiring lawyers and filing complaints with the city. But every time they did, John Harlan's team shut them down fast. The truth was clear now. John wasn't playing games. He was serious, and he wasn't going to stop until everyone in that HOA understood what it felt like to lose something they thought was safe. The final blow came on a rainy Thursday morning. John released a new statement through his lawyer. Effective immediately, all current residents living in Pine Hollow Estates must either 1. Purchase their home at market value within 60 days, or 2. Sign a month-to-month rental agreement at fair market price. No further extensions will be given. It was a cold message, but it was also completely legal. He owned the HOA, which meant he technically owned the land and structures of all 78 homes. He could choose how to manage them. And now, he had chosen to treat them like any other investment. Property. People were furious. At the local diner, neighbors gathered to talk. "I raised my kids here," said one man, eyes red. "Now I have to rent my own house? I paid off my mortgage 10 years ago," shouted another. "How can this be happening?" Some called it revenge. Others called it justice. But most agreed on one thing: John Harlan had won. The final fight. Not everyone gave up without a fight. A group of former HOA members, still bitter from losing everything, decided to take one last shot at getting control back. They hired a high-powered law firm from the city and filed a lawsuit against John, claiming emotional distress, unfair treatment, and even calling his actions a form of harassment. They argued that even though John had followed the rules, what he was doing was morally wrong. "This isn't about the law," one of their lawyers said during a press conference. "This is about fairness. These are hard-working people who never did anything wrong. They shouldn't suffer because of a past HOA board's mistakes," John's lawyer responded calmly. "Mr. Harlan followed every rule. He bought the HOA legally. He owns the property. He has the right to sell or rent as he chooses. If these people feel wronged, they should blame the people who stole from him, not the man who simply fought back." The court agreed. The judge dismissed most of the case, saying John had done nothing illegal. That was the end of the road for the old HOA members. Some moved away. Others stayed, quietly accepting their new status as renters in the homes they used to own. But the biggest surprise came from the county government. After months of investigations into the original land theft, federal agents finally stepped in. The former HOA leaders were arrested again, this time by the FBI. They faced charges of fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and bribery. The county clerk who helped them fake the paperwork was sentenced to prison. The developer who had tried to buy John's land? He backed out completely and returned the documents. Everything was undone, except for one thing: the sale of the 78 homes. That part was real. That part was done, and there was no turning it back. The last message. One evening after everything had settled down, John posted one final message online. It was short. It was simple, but it sent a strong message to anyone who might try something like this again. "I never wanted this. I only wanted to keep what was mine. When they stole from me, I didn't cry. I studied, I planned, and I made sure they would never do it again. To every HOA out there thinking you're above the law, think again. You don't own the land. You don't own the rules. And if you try to take what's not yours, I'll see you in court. Or better yet, I'll see you packing." The post went viral. Thousands of people read it. Some shared it on social media. Others printed it and put it on their fridge. Property rights groups praised John. News channels talked about him as a symbol of standing up to corruption. And across the country, more than a few HOA boards suddenly started acting a little nicer because now they knew there was a man out there who had taken down an entire neighborhood just to prove a point. After all the noise, the lawsuits, the sales, and the arrests, things finally began to calm down in Pine Hollow Estates. The town was no longer the same quiet neighborhood it once was. It had changed forever. Some longtime residents stayed, now living as renters in the homes they used to own. Others packed up and moved away, unable to afford the new prices or the emotional stress. New faces arrived, young families, investors, people who saw opportunity in the chaos. But one man didn't stick around to see it all unfold. John Harlan left town quietly. He didn't throw a party. He didn't give interviews. He just did what he came to do. Take back his land, teach a lesson, and walk away. And that's exactly what happened. Justice served. The former HOA board members faced serious consequences for their actions. 2 of them went to prison after being convicted of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. They were sentenced to several years behind bars, and the judge made it clear: you abused your power, you broke the law, and you hurt real people. Another member tried to plead not guilty, but the evidence was too strong. The emails, the bank records, the bribes, it was all there. He ended up making a deal with prosecutors and got a lighter sentence in exchange for testifying against the others. The county clerk who helped fake the paperwork also lost his job and was banned from working in public office again. He was fined heavily and placed on probation. Even the developer who tried to buy John's land backed out completely. He returned all documents and publicly apologized for getting involved without doing enough research. In the end, everyone who took part in the scheme paid a price, except John, because everything he did was legal. Land reclaimed. After months of court battles and legal filings, the fraudulent sale of John's 1,500 acres was officially canceled. The government ruled that the HOA never had the right to sell the land in the first place. The signatures were forged. The claims of abandonment were false. The bribe proved it all, so the land was given back to John. No questions asked, no apologies needed. He hired surveyors to remark the boundaries, put up new fences, and added extra security to make sure nobody ever stepped onto his property again without permission. This time, he made sure the paperwork was locked down tight. He updated all the records, hired better lawyers, set up automatic checks so if anyone tried to mess with the land again, he would know immediately. He wasn't taking any chances. A new kind of neighborhood, Pine Hollow Estates, became a different kind of place. Without the HOA rules, people could paint their houses any color they wanted. They could park boats, build sheds, even turn their front yards into gardens. It felt more like a small town than a controlled neighborhood. Some people loved it, others missed the structure. But either way, the old HOA was gone for good. New homeowners moved in, bringing fresh energy and ideas. Some started small businesses. Others joined local clubs. Over time, the community began to grow again, this time on its own terms. There were still problems, of course. Without the HOA managing things like trash pickup and road maintenance, some services had to be handled by the city or through private agreements. But people adapted. They formed a new group, not an HOA, but more like a friendly neighborhood council. No fines, no rules about lawn care, just regular meetings to talk about issues and help each other when needed. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair, and that was more than most could say before. John becomes a folk hero back online. John's story spread like wildfire. News channels picked it up. Blogs shared the details. People started calling him a hero, the man who stood up to corrupt HOAs and won. Some called him the land protector. Others joked that he was the HOA whisperer, only instead of helping them, he destroyed them. Property rights groups invited him to speak at events. Real estate forums quoted his story as a warning to anyone thinking about breaking the law. He even received letters from people across the country asking for advice. "My HOA is trying to fine me for painting my house red. What should I do? They said I can't park my truck in my driveway. Can they really do that?" John didn't respond to most of them, but he did write a book. The title? How I Legally Took Back What Was Mine. It was short, it was simple, but it gave people hope. He talked about how to protect your land, how to spot HOA abuse, and how to fight back using the law, not anger. The book became a bestseller, and suddenly more and more people started questioning their HOAs. Were the rules fair? Were the fees reasonable? Did the board really have the right to make those decisions? HOAs across the country began acting more carefully. Because now, they knew, there was a man out there who had taken down an entire neighborhood. Just to prove a point. Life, after the storm, John didn't become rich from the fight. He didn't get richer than he already was, but he did gain something else: respect, peace, and a clear conscience. He returned to his quiet life, far from Pine Hollow Estates. He still owned the 1,500 acres, but he didn't rush to sell it. Instead, he built a small cabin near the edge of the land. Sometimes he'd go there to think, to relax, or just sit under the trees and remember where it all began. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind. "This land has seen generations come and go. Always protect it. Always respect it." John smiled. He had done just that. And maybe, just maybe, he had helped protect someone else's land too.